Welcome to The Impossible, where we empower others to face the impossible, inspire them to be impossible, and motivate them to do the impossible. Fear and feelings of guilt are characteristic of such a condition as a symptom of insufficient adaptation. There is always something too much or too little, and moreover, there is the feeling of a task to be fulfilled and not yet fulfilled. It is unimportant to know what the possible original cause of such a symptom is. The search for the cause is misleading, since the existence of fear continues, not because it has been originally started in the remote past, but because a task is incumbent upon you in the present moment. And inasmuch as it remains unfulfilled, every day produces fear and guilt anew. Where there is fear, there is your task. And that is a quote from letters from Carl Jung to one Mr. Werner S. McCullen, who was a Freudian psychologist back in the 1800s. And those two exchanged some conversation, some dialect, discussing the topic of fear and the topic of guilt and where that can stem from a psychological perspective. Yet, as Jung explains there, it's far less important to know where fear comes from, and it's far more important to know what to do with it and what to do in the face of it. And he states one of his most famous quotes of "Where there's fear, there is your task," essentially meaning that when you feel fear of something, it means that you have a responsibility. It means that you have something to complete. You have a task to complete. Moreover than that, you have potential in that area. And you guys have heard us say constantly on this show that your potential is your responsibility. And as you work to be impossible and build that version of yourself who can do things that you never should have been capable of doing in any domain you chase in life, you are constantly discovering and realizing new potential. And when you see that potential in yourself, you see it in everyone around you. And thus you take on the responsibility of helping others realize that potential within themselves. So we wanted to open up with that quote tonight because it's something that Austin and I have been very intimately dealing with here recently. From obviously very different levels. Austin is dealing with fear of the reality he faces right now, of not knowing the future and having a diagnosis of cancer at his age that could kill him, facing a treatment that could kill him, and the uncertainty that can ensue from that. I've been going through a good bit of fear as I chase my next impossible goal of the 500-pound squat. And so we wanted to come on and break down fear for you guys, how we deal with fear, how we approach it, and ultimately our solution of how we embrace fear as part of our lives. Use it to drive us forward in our task and find our highest level of potential within it. So we wanted to open up with that quote because, man, I just think to me that is the perfect explanation of fear.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it gives, I love the perspective that he has of it doesn't matter where the fear comes from.
Precisely.
Like that, like we could sit and discuss that forever and ever and ever, and we're going to be no wiser for finding the answer. Mm-hmm. Because ultimately it doesn't matter where the fear comes from. What matters is what you do with it. And that's what Jung tries to lay out to Mr. McCullen in saying that don't worry about where your fear came from. Find your task within it.
Because ultimately, no matter how much effort, it being needless or unnecessary even, to search where that fear comes from, let's say that you luck out and you find where that fear is sourced, where it's where it originated from, guess what? You're going to have to move towards battling the fear regardless.
Yeah.
So that is time wasted,
Yeah.
I guess we could say, in trying to find the source of the fear. Now, maybe a little bit harsh. Maybe it is something that's deeply, deeply personal to you, and there might be some reconciliation that is possible from maybe some of the situations in which the different fears that you chase. But ultimately, tackling that fear head on is the most that is the most paramount and necessary move for you to make.
Yeah. And we've got two very real world examples of what we're living through right now that kind of lays this out and gives a good demonstration of what this process can look like. And I wanted to start with yours because here you are on your third relapse of Hodgkin's lymphoma, and you're facing the ultimate treatment.
Yeah.
The one that you did not want to do above everything else. And not even just because you fear the treatment, although I would imagine there's some level of that there, but moreover because you fear what the treatment could result in, the quote unquote treatment could result in, permanent damage to your body in multiple areas, loss of fertility, potentially loss of life. There's all these things that could stem from this. And so now you're in a position where back in August, when this third relapse came about, you were looking at many different options, and ultimately you came to the realization that this is just something you're going to have to tackle head on,
yes,
just like you stated. So I wanted to see, like, what was that process like initially of facing that fear and choosing to find your task within it. What exactly did your task end up being? And how are you still pushing toward that even today, now months into this process?
Originally, I believe, the fear was stemming from having already somewhat put a front ready to battle that war that is the stem cell transplant. Because for the second relapse, as you know, and as some of you know, a stem cell transplant was possible. That was the option that was on the table. I had 3 oncologists tell me that I needed to go through with the autologous stem cell transplant. And yet we went towards a different direction, knowing that different direction may not work, and the autologous stem cell transplant still loomed kind of in the back of my head. It was still hanging around. And as you said, the fear, some of the smaller, I don't want to say smaller, more insignificant fears were was the permanent infertility. That was the biggest one. I will be susceptible to mutations down the road. So I may not only relapse again down the road, but it could be a more aggressive type of cancer.
Yeah, a totally different type.
Yeah, totally different. Yeah,
like some of these treatments cause so much cellular and genetic damage that you can actually get a cancer down the road from the treatment for your cancer.
Yeah,
like it's just this awful cycle that can occur.
Which is one of many reasons why that we struggle to call these treatment.
Yeah.
And so having these more insignificant, I wouldn't even say fears, but anxieties maybe. But it was nothing that was nagging me. Back then it was nagging me every day, especially the permanent infertility. I'm 29 years old. Why should I have to think about infertility right now for the rest of my life?
Yeah. Well, and not only that, but you were watching Lauren and I go through what is the horror of IVF. Like in real time, you were watching us spend years, tens of thousands of dollars and endless heartbreak in that journey, which I will say is people who have not been through that, and especially there's a lot of healthcare practitioners out there that I think, give those options to people without realizing the full gravity of it. And I think until you've been exposed to that situation, you can never realize the full gravity. But anybody who's ever faced that challenge, it's one of the hardest things I've ever battled through, like hands down. And so it sounds like, on the surface, it sounds like, oh, that's no big deal, there's lots of ways to have kids. Well, it's not that easy.
No.
Not that easy.
And it's something that I even struggle with now in this moment, and I will for a while, is that if I find a partner for the future, that is a conversation that I have to have with them. Is that, oh, hey, by the way, if you would like children, it's going to require a lot of needles, lots of injections, and a lot of guesswork. And hey, by the way, a lot of money.
Yeah.
So that is a newborn anxiety, something that stemmed from another anxiety, is how do I find somebody that's just okay with doing that? I know that there are a lot of women out there that would be okay with that, but that's something that I now have to put into the boxes that have to be checked just in trying to find a partner, is someone who is willing to do that.
And it's a big one. Like, that's something that could end a relationship. Like, there's stories of people who, if one partner finds out they're infertile, that they will end marriages. They will end decade-long relationships because of that. Because there's some people that are so committed to biological, natural children, that, and I mean, you can't necessarily fault anybody one way or the other, but it is something that carries an immense amount of gravity with it.
And I've had personal experiences of what that can do to a relationship that does stick together. Mm-hmm. But at what benefit, at what costs, can be permanently damaging for those who are around them. And so I have a lot of fears originally coming, for my second relapse of thinking about the stem cell transplant. Where I've gained a lot of headway has been the time that I've had since the second relapse to now. Having done all my research, having read into the stories of those who have gone through this, has really given me a lot of power, and has also given me a lot of direction. I'm not aiming from the hip towards this new enemy. I'm not undertrained. I'm not underskilled. I'm not low on confidence. I'm coming into it with so much natural, procured ferocity. And that within itself strips away whatever power fear may have had on me. It's absolutely... It's been a joy for me to watch and to feel and to see and to experience myself skinning inch by inch that ugly head of fear and breaking it down to its most flawed and exposed sense, and be able to ridicule it and to belittle it as what it has done to me over the past 27 and a half years. And that has been the most enjoyable in time that I've almost been able to have. I would have to say a few phenomenal pasta dishes in Italy can certainly
rival it.
Certainly get up there. But jokes aside, I've been able to return the favor to fear of what it did to me for so long. And there are other aspects in my life to where I do have some anxieties and I have some fears that do need, that not only do need my attention, will garner my attention here soon. But unfortunately, fortunately for them at this moment, I have some other bigger tasks at hand. And that fills me with so much joy, but ultimately confidence in the future that is in question.
Yeah.
Yes. But I'm not here to stop and to succumb to that fear of, oh, am I going to be alive in a couple of months? Is this going to kill me? Well, it can. All right. Okay, it can. What's really, really incredible about being able to make that statement is that my heart does not skip a beat. My heart does not pulse really fast after I say that. I've been able to relinquish all of fear's powers against me in the reality that I have to face in 2 weeks. Less than 2 weeks. So that is such an empowering feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so much of that comes from the fact that you've put in so much work into this process over the last several years.
Yeah.
I mean, confidence, you'll hear so many of the best minds will say that confidence is a direct reflection of competence. So the more competent you become at any task, the more confident you will become within that task. And so the best way to breed confidence, which is a little bit more of a in the air, kind of less tangible feeling and state, is to do something, to directly do something that you can become more competent in. And that's going to bleed over to every aspect of life. Just like when we say, when you find that potential within yourself, you see it in everyone around you. When you find potential in yourself in one situation, you're going to find it in other situations as well. So when you go out and run a half marathon, when you go out and break past barriers you never dreamed of in powerlifting competitions, when you sit in that chair and endure chemo you never thought you could endure, every time you do stuff like that, that process of what we would call being impossible, you become, you see that potential that you hold within, and every time you do that, more and more that you can apply that to any situation you find in life. So when you get to this situation, you've now put in the reps, you've built up the competence, so confidence will breed from that. And you can go into this fight with fear, with uncertainty, with anxiety, but you can also know that I've been in impossible situations before. I've created a new individual within those situations. And that individual was able to face that impossible and do the impossible. And so when you know that in your heart, you can trust yourself to be able to do that again in any situation you face in life. And so I think what's been so cool for me is to watch you throughout. I mean, obviously it's not cool to watch you go through a relapse.
Totally gnarly, dude.
It's been so awesome watching you have cancer. Like just a blast, man.
Doing great, by the way.
You should do it more often.
So inspiring, man.
But no, what's been so cool to see is your progression from relapse to relapse to relapse. Yeah. Comparing, and I know you and I have had many conversations about this off mic and off camera, but seeing the person that you were in your very first diagnosis versus this third, and I'm going to say final relapse.
Oh, it will be final.
Yeah. And seeing how you, not that it was easy, not that there was no fear involved, but seeing you face the situation, accept the situation, and charge forward is this most recent relapse that's occurred on a level that I've never seen out of you before. And so it's been honestly, it's been an honor to witness that. And it helps drive me forward in training. I know it's driving a lot of people forward in their tasks in life. And we got some cool surprises coming, so people can help represent and embody that direction and that mindset and that movement. But that's what's been cool to see, is to see your growth and your progression in this area, even though you're facing what is now basically the highest form of fear that you've had to face in this whole journey, yet you're able to tackle it and charge forward in the face of it so much more efficiently and effectively than you've ever been able to do so before.
And a quote here by Julius Caesar, I think, really encapsulates everything that we just kind of set up to this point, is that without training, they lacked knowledge. Without knowledge, they lacked confidence. Without confidence, they lacked victory. And I declare that I will be victorious in this.
Yeah. And that is a direct reflection of what we talk about. You know, without knowledge, you can't hope to be competent. And no matter what you're chasing. I mean, knowledge is not the ultimate peak form of anything, but I do think it's one of the very first steps to any journey.
It's a foundation that doesn't need to have any cracks in it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you have the power to make and create and to maintain that column to be as sturdy as you want it to be. Mm-hmm. And that's and I'll keep saying this, that's a piece of this entire journey that you were the one that pushed me into. You at the very beginning, you're like, all right, listen, man, this is going to be rough. I remember our conversations back in January and February of 2022 when I was going through these tests, and you're like, hey, man, just, stay low, keep your head on straight, let's just get through all of these, because it could mean a few things. And then when it finally came true, yes, I had my moments of being very incompetent and going, this is an absolute mountain of news that I just received. But then as soon as I received that news, you and I had discussed a plan of action before I got back to see the ENT specialist who sent me in for all of these tests to tell me that I was diagnosed. I walked into that office and I didn't shed a tear. I probably had a smile on my face, not in front of my mother, but that's for obvious reasons. But I walked into that office already having a plan of action, already having a course of what was going to be done. I knew where I was going. I knew my treatment. I knew who was going to be my oncologist. And I knew at that time as well who was going to be filling out my drugs. I knew all of that. And then you helped me understand what the ABVD, the treatment that I was on. You helped me in understanding what the side effects were, what they meant, what it meant long term. And at that point we weren't really thinking super long term.
Yeah.
But in all of that I gained within a few weeks is what immediately just kind of made me click and go, all right, I can be strong in this as long as I stay smart about what I do and what I'm going through. Because I was already at somewhat of a peak in terms of nutrition and performance leading up to that with your help. And so when I was brought into this completely new world, you started doing that stuff, and I was just like, whoa, all right, time to step up my game. And now when I hear anybody in the medical world tell a cancer patient not to read up on the internet and stuff like that, I immediately want to tell them, no, don't you dare tell them that.
Yeah.
Knowledge is power in this case. Mm-hmm. You're going to read some crazy stuff, yes, but you have to be able to weed through it. And how do you learn how to weed through it? By reading. Yeah. By reading into it and asking questions. Ask questions. Ask.
Mm-hmm. The pursuit of knowledge will shed light on the questions that need asked.
Yeah. Yeah, and
You
that
know,
too.
and
Yeah,
that's-
you'll find out new questions that need to be asked. And then
And
you'll
all
find out
of-
even more precise answers from those.
Yeah, and all of that process gives you direction. And as we're going to talk about later, like direction is one of the most key pieces in any pursuit, because you can't. I mean, you can't move forward in any positive manner if you don't have direction. And knowledge. Like I like how you say knowledge is a foundation, and that's really what it is. Like it's not going to give you knowledge alone will not give you the answer. It won't give you the process. It won't even necessarily give you the task. But if you accept that wisdom is the proper application of knowledge, then you have to accept that you cannot apply something that you don't have. So you have to start with that. You have to start with knowledge. You have to learn about your situation. You have to learn about your fear. You have to spend time with that fear. You have to understand that fear. You have to find your task within that fear. So it's not so much, as Jung proposes, it's not about sitting and saying, where is this fear coming from? The question rather should be, what am I supposed to do with this fear? And when you have that shift, it immediately allows you to look from present to future rather than past to present. And looking past to present doesn't really give you anything, because even if you understand that process totally, it still doesn't give you direction with where to move forward. It may help you in not repeating the past, but it won't help you discover new potential within yourself. And so that's like where I've been battling very severely this whole prep with, you guys know I've talked about it before, but chasing this 500-pound squat, looking like potentially over 500 pounds at this point. I want to squat more than any amputee in the world ever has. And it's an honor to be on that journey. It's an honor to be able to chase that. But as I've grown higher and higher in my competence and in my strength in this pursuit, my fear has grown in proportion.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. It's interesting to see that process. And at first it caused me some concern of, I'm getting better and better at squatting. I'm putting more and more reps in. I'm getting more comfortable with the process of it. So why am I becoming increasingly afraid of it? And what it really comes down to is I'm getting closer and closer to something truly impossible. I'm getting closer to something that I have no right, no reason to be able to do. And yet I'm going through the process of building a person who can do that. And I've always said that when you're chasing an impossible goal, it should spark a little bit of fear in you. It should give you that kind of nervous, uneasy feeling, that little bit of anxiety. It tells you that you're truly pushing yourself to a level that you're not fully confident in. Because when you go out and complete something that you don't have confidence in yet, it will immediately build confidence in that thing. And thus, you immediately have a higher level of confidence by default from the competence you just built. And so I think whenever you're chasing something impossible, you have to have that fear as a prerequisite.
Right.
So that you're truly going through the process. But what's been interesting to me is every training session, we go to new heights. We've been going to them very quickly, courtesy of an incredible coach, Jaden Lacaria, who we're hoping to bring you guys on this show very, very soon, because he's got a phenomenal mind, a phenomenal spirit, and an incredible insight into human performance and pushing it to all kinds of new levels that haven't been explored, levels that should not be able to be achieved. And he's been incredible to work with throughout this process. I'm very thankful for him. But perhaps my favorite thing about him is he is so acutely aware of exactly where my body can go and should go week to week. He places absolutely no limitations on me. He gives me no excuses. And he's not afraid to push me to an impossible level. And that's what happened today. So my previous 1 rep max on squat I set back in August. It was 425 pounds. I barely completed that, and it took me taking myself to an entirely new level mentally, emotionally, spiritually than I ever had before to hit that squat. And throughout this whole prep since the marathon, which is a very short, abbreviated prep, only about 5 weeks in total, we've been working on chains, which is a little bit different from straight weight, but I've been under bigger and bigger numbers each week and doing things every single week. I look at my program, I'm like, there is no way I'm doing that. And so, last weekend I had 480 pounds on my back, and I never thought I'd be able to hold that. But holding on that on my back started making the 500 seem more realistic.
Right.
Then this weekend, we're back to straight weight for the first time, this entire prep, the first time on straight weight. And I see my program and it says 91 to 96% for 3 reps. I see that and I'm like, what are we even doing?
What am I supposed to do here?
What is happening? I start calculating the numbers and I realize 91% is like 420 pounds. Which is only 5 pounds under my 1 rep max. And I calculate 96%, and I realize that's 443 pounds. Like 20 pounds more than I've ever squatted in my life for 1 rep, and I've got to do it 3 times. And you guys know that squat carries a particularly deep, visceral, and instinctual amount of fear to me because of being an amputee. Because of my prosthetic, I am naturally much less stable and much less confident on my feet. Mm-hmm. And when I'm under a squat bar, it is one of the peak amounts of fear for me because I'm under more weight than I weigh and getting close to double the amount of weight that I weigh. I'm being supported by this piece of carbon fiber and titanium and Kevlar that could break at any time, or it could slip out from under me, and that way it could crush me. And so it brings forth this very visceral sense of fear, because not only is that weight a threat, but my own body is a threat because of its lack of stability and its lack of inherent competence in this area. Because I'm an amputee, I'm always going to be less physically competent than someone who had 2 legs. Now, we'll go into it later, probably on a different episode, but I believe the fact that I am an amputee has made me, while it's, caused challenges physically, it's actually provided immense amounts of strength mentally, spiritually, and emotionally that more than compensate for that one decrease. But because of that situation, the just nature of that moment under the squat bar, it brings about a different level of fear, that fear for survival. And that's why it's become one of my favorite movements, though, is because facing that fear, finding a task within that fear, and ultimately embracing that fear on a weekly basis, I've learned so much about myself. I've learned how to push myself to points that I didn't even know were there. And I found immense potential in a very short amount of time within myself. And that whole process is being impossible.
And it must be exhilarating to do that as well.
Oh, it is.
I know
really
it. That kind, like you said, the culmination and the build up of as the weight goes up, the gravitas and the fear, the gravity of the situation also builds as well. But it must be somewhat exhilarating and exciting to get in there every week to go, I get to do this again.
Yeah. And that's what happened today. So I've got this running around my head all day. All I can think about is 443 for 3. And I woke up this morning and it's running through my head. I couldn't even eat very much this morning because I was just like sick to my stomach thinking about it. And, we had a bunch of family plans today, did a bunch of awesome things, but it was kind of a rush day. A lot was happening. I didn't get my normal, like, calm, relaxed, get a good meal in. Like all the boxes I normally try to check for a squat day did not get checked today. And yet we still had to show up and make it happen. So fortunately, I'm very thankful to be surrounded by some of the very best people, and having you and Pete and Paul and so many other people always show up to help out too. But having you guys around me who I literally trust with my life to support me and keep me safe in those moments, that brings me an amount of comfort that actually allows me to face this task. So we get there, start warming up. Honestly, warm-ups did not feel great until I got my heeled shoes on. I could not squat at all. And I don't even know what was going on, because usually I can do lightweight on flat soles. Could not do it at all today for whatever reason. Get my shoes on, start going up a little bit. We get up to a 341 single. Mind you, 100 pounds under the weight I have to do for 3 reps. I do 341 for a single, and it felt heavy. Like, it felt really heavy. Like, it moved good, but it felt heavy for what the weight was and where I knew I had to go. And I actually told Paul, I was like, so all we got to do is add 100 pounds and do it for 3 more reps. Like, that's, it's my way of trying to take the edge off a little bit.
Right.
But after that moment, I really focused on getting my mind to a place of just focusing on each individual rep at a time, right, each task as it presented itself. And when you do that, I think it helps limit the control that the fear has over you, because you're not looking at the entire task and the entire fear as a whole. Mm-hmm. You're looking at the fear that comes with each individual step of the entire process, and allows you to kind of break it down and take it,
right,
step by step, bite by bite. And, we did the 341, we popped off and did through 385 on the bar, did that for a single. That moved decent. And then we go straight from there to 425, first working set for a triple. And this is my 1 rep max. So there's a lot of fear inherent with this. And my brain's still jumping to that 443. And it's like, it was hard to even focus on the 425 because I still knew what was yet to come. But I made myself come back to what I just said, where I was trying to focus on each individual rep at a time, each individual movement. And I tried to make each movement as perfect as possible. And this was something I did a little better today than I've been able to do in the past. Not running from that fear. There's been times in this prep where I'm under the squat bar and I start to go down. And I think anybody who has ever squatted heavy before, you understand this feeling. You stop too high. Yep. Because you're afraid of that. You're literally afraid of the depth. Figuratively and literally, you become afraid of the depth. And you know that there's a certain point where if you keep going down, you're not coming back up. Yet there is a certain depth you have to reach in order to rise victorious. So that was my main thing I wanted to hit today, was like, I need that depth to truly feel victory in this moment, whether the weight moves or not. I switched my brain around to say, I don't even care if I don't complete the rep. as long as I push myself to that depth, as long as I fully welcome in and embrace this fear and become comfortable sitting with it so that I can find my task within it. And that's what I was able to do for the 425. And coming out of that 425, the first 2 reps moved pretty good. The 3rd rep, I definitely hit a sticking point, but came out of it.
Yeah.
And it had a consistent movement to it. So there was it was interesting. A certain amount of that 440, the fear that I had for the 443 was relieved just by doing the 425. Even though I felt like I barely got through that set and I didn't know how I was going to go almost 20 pounds heavier, I really gained a certain amount of relief. And I think it's simply in that process of, that was an immense fear that I faced, that I came out on the other side victorious. It built up a little more competence, gave me a little more confidence, and allowed me to really focus on what I needed to focus on going into the 443. And so I had you put on a certain album that for many reasons holds. I'm not like, I avidly enjoy music. There's not many songs though that totally have hold over my emotional state like certain parts of that album does. And when I had you, as I'm sitting there trying to get myself like mentally prepared, rest and recovered for this 443, I had you skip forward to like the last 2 songs on that album. And I've not pulled that tool out of my hat in a very long time. It's something I've been working to try to make sure I can perform under any situation, regardless of music, regardless of even equipment to a point, regardless of any physical challenge I'm facing, regardless of anything. I want to make sure I can perform at any given time, and I don't need these certain things to be able to achieve what I need to achieve. But today it wasn't even felt like I needed that. It just felt like I wanted to sit with the emotion that brings within me. So it's like before that first song even ended, which is an entire song that builds up to the final song, I stand up and I'm like holding back tears in my eyes. Yeah. And I feel that feeling that I do not get this often. I got it a little bit in the August competition for sure, but I literally start to get like a tunnel vision, and it's like everything in the real physical world kind of starts to just fade a little bit. And I just feel like I'm totally in an internally based state.
You were shaking.
Yeah. And
I saw you were doing this, putting your belt on. I'm like,
yeah,
he's ready to go.
It's like totally internal. I'm like barely hearing the music, barely feeling the weight, barely like noticing anything in the external reality. I get under that weight and I lift it up. It's funny to say I barely even remember feeling it on my back. I know it was there, but I barely remember feeling it. And when I'm in these moments, I've talked about this before, but I always go back to the kid who was coming off of ECMO, the kid who was told he may never walk again, he may never function mentally or physically independently again, the kid who had so many limitations placed on him. And yet, thanks to so many people around me, I was able to overcome those limitations and build what I've built today. So I always go back to that moment, and I know that I'll never be able to be strong enough for who I am now, but I will always be able to be strong enough for that kid who needed it then. So it's when I can fully embrace that state, it feels as if I could never fail. And so I got into that state, and I do remember, the one thing I remember most about the lift tonight was staring straight ahead, and there's a green Rogue calibrated plate there. I don't know why that one stuck out in my vision, but it's just that green plate, and that's like almost all I can see. I saw that green plate, and I'm like, one rep at a time. Each rep's got to be perfect. And so I come down, I make sure I hit good depth, and I come up. And first one moves great, no issues. But again, it's like I'm barely even feeling reality at this point. I see that green plate again, and I think one more rep, and I do a second rep, and it comes up and it moves well.
Really well.
And then I see that green plate again. I just think one more rep. And then I go down, and the whole time I'm going down, in my brain, it's like my brain is trying to scream like, you're not going to come up, you're not going to come up, you're not going to come up. And my response to that purely is, I don't care. Because all that matters is that I hit depth. Mm-hmm. And hitting depth is easy, physically speaking. Like, all you got to do is stop holding the weight, and boy, you'll hit depth.
Not mentally, though.
Like, there's no trouble with hitting depth. The trouble with hitting depth comes in having the emotional, spiritual, and mental fortitude to take yourself to that level. Mm-hmm. That's what I wanted to achieve tonight. And so, even though it's the physically easiest part of the lift, it's the hardest part of the lift in every other area. So I go down and down and down, and I feel myself hit that depth point, and I just say, okay, I've found my task. And what's more is I've found my victory, and to a point, my salvation in that moment of hitting depth, because that is where my fear was hitting depth. My fear wasn't even about completing the rep. That's what I realized tonight. It was never about completing the rep, because I know that I've got you and Pete and Paul there. Like, I'm going to be fine. Paul can squat 700 pounds. Like,
he'll pick you.
He could pick me and the bar up and set us both on the rack.
Yeah.
Like, so even if I start to fail in the lift, it doesn't matter, because you'll be there to catch me. I'll be fine. I'll be okay. All of my fear was in putting myself in a vulnerable enough position to hit that depth. And I hit it, and those chains are broken, and I'm free to come back up. And it was not an easy rep necessarily coming back up. I hit a sticking point, but what's wild to me is all three of those reps at the 443 moved better than any of the ones at 425 did. Yeah. And so somehow you add 20 pounds on the bar, 20 pounds over my 1 rep max, and I do it for 3 reps, and I move better than I did when I was more fresh in that session and at a lower weight.
Hitting good depth.
Yeah. And I think it's purely because when you can release this mental, emotional, spiritual side of you, the body physically follows suit, and you find a level of strength that could not and should not have existed otherwise. And that's literally the process of being impossible. Mm-hmm. You know, I come up on that 3rd rep, and I'm like, suddenly reality starts to flow back, and I get the bar seated, and I'm literally in like disbelief that, like,
yeah, you stayed under the bar for a second.
Did that really just happen? You know?
Paul's like, hey,
I'm
you're
just
done.
Totally like in disbelief. And it takes me a second to kind of come down from that. And then it's just, as you said, it's because the fear is so intense, it makes the victory so intense.
Oh, it's so sweet.
And it just, it brings this level of satisfaction, this level of gratitude, this level of meaning and purpose that you will not find anywhere else. And for you, that doesn't have to be under a squat bar, but it does have to be in some of the places where you are the most vulnerable. Mm-hmm. I'm most vulnerable under a squat bar because of my missing leg. And that's what makes the fear so much more intense, makes the task so much more immense, and makes the victory that much sweeter. Mm-hmm. So that's what we urge you guys to be able to do. Not to chase fear in the sense that You're trying to know where it comes from, trying to figure out what caused it, what's fueling it, what's driving it. Because that's purely you looking to the past. But we want you to look forward to the future and say, here is my fear, and there is my task. And I think we could even take Dr. Jung's profound statement one step forward. And I think you could say, where there is fear, there is your salvation. Because ultimately, when you embrace that fear, when you become comfortable sitting with it and showing it who you've created in the face of it, and you allow yourself to be fully vulnerable and exposed and one with that fear, that's where you'll find your victory. And when you do that, it immediately releases you from the grip of that specific fear, and you're free to move forward into a new world of potential. And I can't think of a better definition for salvation than that.
It's such a beautiful trophy that we'd be able to put up on that shelf.
Absolutely. And when you do that on a continual basis, because I hit that squat tonight, because you are on a daily basis facing and sitting with and becoming and embracing this fear of the stem cell transplant and everything that entails with it, we are able to find greater competence, greater confidence, greater potential within ourselves that will carry on to every single other aspect of our lives for the rest of our lives. And you think what this process compounded over 3 years has done for you, what happens when it's 30?
Yeah.
That's what's cool to think about.
Yeah. Oh, whoa. Oh, that hit me. I haven't thought that far yet. Wow. Yeah. And a perfect way to sum up this for me, I think, is another quote that I can certainly finish with here from Seneca that's really helped me through this entire process. In everything that we've talked about, ultimately, you have to find yourself in that stretch of keeping you directed forward and looking towards that goal, knowing that you will get there and enjoying the ride to of which you find yourself in. But from Seneca here, it's, if a man knows not to which port he sails, no wind is favorable. And let me tell you, the winds that I have found so far have been very favorable. No matter where they come from, no matter their source.
And it's because you know exactly where you're headed.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. Can't think of a better way to wrap that up tonight than that. And we appreciate you guys listening in on this discussion. If you have additional thoughts or comments or things you want to add to this discussion, please feel free to leave them below in the comments. Hit us up on social media. We love hearing from you guys. We read all of our messages, all of our comments, and it's actually us that is responding to each and every one of those. So we love to hear from you guys. We love to get your thoughts because we know you're a highly intellectual and emotionally, spiritually, mentally mature group of people. It's constantly searching to find higher levels of potential, higher levels of meaning, higher levels of confidence in your own life. And we'd love to hear your own stories of how you've faced your fear, found your task within it, and how you've become victorious in those moments. That's what fuels us. That's what drives us. That's why we do everything we do. So I want to thank you guys for listening tonight. If you'd like to support this show in any way, the number one thing you can do is if you found something valuable in this episode, please share it with someone you think it would help. Because that, at the end of the day, is how we reach our mission and our vision of spreading this mission and this mindset to global proportions. You can also check out, links are in the show notes, but you can check out King and Fifth Headwear. You guys know we've been wearing these guys since day one of this podcast. We've been working with them for a long time, and you will not find better performance headwear, better leisure headwear, better formal headwear. They check every box you could ever need. And I'll tell you guys, I am really rough on my training gear. And this hat I'm wearing today actually is the hat I squatted in tonight. And it's a hat that I've had for basically the beginning since we've been working with this company. And every time I wash it, it still comes out good as new, despite the abuse that I put it through.
I have my black pinstripe Senna
Yeah.
sitting over there. I apologize. But yeah, I love their hats. The Senna is still and will forever be my favorite.
Absolutely. And a newer group we've been working with, you guys see us drinking it on pretty much every episode, is Kinetic Ketones. I've actually been incorporating their concentrated ketones into my squat performance day. So I'm fueling now with carbs and ketones as a combination. And something I took from the endurance world, actually, that I'm really enjoying having in the strength and explosive world as well. But they're a phenomenal company, great group to work with. All natural, organic products, no caffeine. It's 12 grams of ketones per can or per dose, and it provides a level of mental and physical performance and acuity that we don't even get from caffeine. So it's nice to be able to bring one of these down at 10 o'clock at night when we're recording this, and you can chug a Kinetic and still sleep like a baby. It's not going to give you jitters. It's not going to keep you up. It's not going to do any of that. There's no addiction potential. There's no nothing. It's just pure mental and physical performance. And that's why we love working with them. So check them out. They're a great company and they're growing very quickly. So get in on it while you can. But at the end of the day, guys, we just want to say thank you, because we appreciate you being a part of this movement, this mission, this vision, this mindset, everything we are working to build as we grow this culture of what we're doing at Impossible Performance. So guys, until next time, we appreciate you listening, because at Impossible Performance, we are striving to build a global culture of strength, fostering a spirit of growth in constant pursuit of the impossible. Thank you for listening, and as always, be impossible.